And here we are. This is Jim at the House of Pooh Corner. And we are trying to focus in on Connor Kelley right now, who's joining us from Boston. And we're finally coming into focus, it looks like. And the reason I asked Connor to be my guest is because he's of Irish descent from Boston, and I thought somebody like that should have a pretty good perspective on what's going on in the world. And we've been communicating on the subject of Julian Assange, Syria, and various other topics of interest, from people like Tulsi Gabbard to Bernie Sanders. And so I'm wondering, Kelley, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and where you'd like to start today?
Sure. I was born in Brighton, which is a section of Boston, and I went to school down in Philly at St. Joseph's University, and now I'm back living in Boston again. So this is my home. It's kind of been a magnet for me. A lot of family around here. Basically my whole family. So.
And tell me a little bit more about your ancestry coming over from Ireland.
Right. On my father's side, I don't know how many, if it's a great-great-grandfather or great-great-great-grandfather, but he came over in the late 1850s, 1860s to avoid the Irish famine. And so he was the first Kelley to arrive in America. And then my mother's side of the family came in the 1930s, and they all managed. They came through Canada, and everyone kind of managed to settle in Boston, the greater Boston area. And so,
one of my relatives, one of my many Australian relatives, and my family's Australian, basically, married an Irish lady, early 1900s.
Yeah.
And we were very proud to discover that she was a convict.
Oh, yeah. Well,
a convict sent to, well, she wasn't, but her family were convicts sent to Australia. Yeah. Excommunicated from England and sent there.
Yeah. They like to pick up the, quote, undesirables and send them off to the colonies.
Yeah.
You know, for whatever reason, real or imagined.
Yeah. Of course, it was a matter of shame at one point, but now the Aussies are frantically looking to prove that they had prisoners in their ancestry.
And a lot of Irish went to Australia.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, my family in Australia was the exact opposite. They were business people coming from Scotland. They went to India, and from India, they went to Australia. And anyway, here we are. Why don't you tell us a little bit now about the topics that we've been discussing on Facebook?
So I guess, can you hear me? Is everything good?
I can hear you. It's a little muffled. I don't know how the audience is getting it out there, but I can hear you fine.
Okay, so I guess starting with Tulsi Gabbard, people kind of forget the impact she had in 2016 when she quit the DNC over its treatment of Bernie Sanders. And I thought that was kind of a huge moment that kind of slipped under the radar and is kind of being washed away these days. That was a very big deal. She quit the DNC because they're basically acting like a corporation, treating a legitimate, powerful candidate with disrespect and subterfuge and all types of things. And she stood up against that, quit, and DNC, just was running wild, trying to figure out a way to make that not seem so bad. And so now obviously she's announced her candidacy, and I'm a supporter of her. I don't support everything she does. I mean, she's in the military, and that might turn some people off, but she also is very active in Veterans Affairs and the health of veterans, and obviously cares about where our troops are sent. I don't think she's going to be caught up fighting someone else's war for them. She was the only person in Congress to actually go to Syria and see what was going on for herself. So, and I think that took a lot of guts, and I think it rubbed a lot of people in government the wrong way. And so I've been reading and hearing a lot of stuff where they're trying to find someone. Even Bernie met with the DNC recently, I heard, and so I think they're just trying to kind of get her out of the way, so to speak, quickly, and so she doesn't get to build up the kind of grassroots support that sort of surprised everyone in 2016 with Bernie Sanders, and him having won every county in West Virginia, yet because of superdelegates, Hillary won the state, which I find is totally backwards, and the Democratic Party is certainly undeserving of the name. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that, on Tulsi Gabbard, or how you feel about that, what's going on, how she's handled herself, or if you disagree with her on certain things.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've recently looked at her site very carefully, and I've recently looked at all the negative comments that I hear from the progressives about Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah.
And the site wins, in my opinion, at this point. So I agree with you that she's got more on her side than she does against her. And I'm following what she says and what she does as much as I can.
Right.
And I put out a post a long time ago, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, I should say, in which I said, I think the key to knowing whether or not Tulsi Gabbard is for real, in other words, is she a real progressive, is she honest, will be whether or not the mainstream media picks up on her candidacy. If they do the same thing to her that they did to Ron Paul, then we'll know that Tulsi is for real. And she's a good, hardworking, honest person. That's kind of my measuring stick. You people out there can measure her however you want. But I don't believe that the negative things that I have heard are anywhere near as important as the positive things that I know she has done. She has stood for pulling out of Syria.
Yep.
And the Democrats are running around like chickens with their heads cut off, trying to think of a way to
pro-war,
So I do think pulling out of Syria is a landmark decision that Trump made, and any Democrat who goes against that is just following the line of the DNC and the deep state. So
exactly,
that's kind of how I feel about Tulsi Gabbard or Gabbard at this point. But again, I'm waiting to see how the mainstream media picks up on it. I have no respect for Bernie Sanders at all. I live in Vermont. I know his career. I've seen him backstab the Liberty Union. I saw him backstab Ron Paul. I've seen the lies he told about the F-35 and Lake Champlain. So I've really had it with him. So I'm wondering, he's clearly within the DNC, in DNC heaven right now, because he signed on to the DNC with his future candidacy. Okay, I'm with you. So we'll see. I would be disappointed in Tulsi Gabbard if she fell for a matchup. With him. Yeah,
exactly. And a lot of people, I think, are hoping for that, and I just don't. I think obviously you being in Vermont have had more direct kind of coverage and contact with Bernie Sanders, so you probably know more about him and his less reputable actions than I do. Obviously, I wanted him to be president in 2016, and once the DNC, made it pretty clear that from the beginning that Hillary Clinton was a candidate, and also went on to prove it in open court that they argued that there's no such thing as a Democrat, that the platform is basically meaningless, and things like that. They basically exposed themselves as a private corporation who supports certain candidates, and you can support them if you want. Basically, ultimately, it's up to us, and you don't really have a voice in it. So it's really hard to support Democrats now, any kind of Democrats. But Tulsi, again, is when she quit the DNC, she made a big statement. And I think she sticks with the Democrats because before she did that, obviously they helped build her career. They got her money to run and all this kinds of stuff. So she probably has some loyalty to the party. Mm-hmm. But I also feel she has a very strong sense of who she is, and someone who fought on the front lines as a medic and cared for injured troops. I feel is going to be much less likely to use those troops for war profiteering purposes. Mm-hmm. She has a deep love for the like some other candidates and stuff like that. So as far as Bernie, he lost me the second he told people to vote for Hillary, and that was probably long after he lost you, but again, you've had closer contact with him and stuff like that. So
yeah.
But yeah, I definitely agree that Bernie isn't who at least I. Mm-hmm. And now that it's come out that he's having meetings with the DNC, to me that can only mean two things: either they know he's the only person who can beat Trump, so they're trying to work out a way for him to be accepted by the banks and whoever, stuff like that. Or two, they're trying to figure out how to use him as a controlled opposition to get one of the establishment candidates in. Either way, he's working with the DNC, the same organization that torpedoed his candidacy. And that just says a lot to me. Mm-hmm. Without saying really anything, it says a lot.
Yeah. Well, knowing him the way I do, I would predict that he will do anything, literally anything, the DNC/deep state, if you will, tells him to do. And just look at what he did to Ron Paul when they almost had the Federal Reserve on the ropes. Right. They had a wonderful bill in hand, and he undermined it and stabbed Ron Paul in the back. And that was many years ago. Yeah. And that was after I knew what he had done to my friends in the Liberty Union Party in Vermont. That's ages. That's real ancient history that nobody cares about anymore anyway. I mean, I know people who hired him when he was a young man first coming up from Brooklyn. Yeah. So that's kind of where my knowledge of Bernie goes back to. Yeah. So yeah, we'll take a look. We'll watch Tulsi Gabbard, and I have no problem with her being in the Army. A lot of progressives say, well, I'm not going to vote for anybody who was in the Army. Well, that's about as close-minded as you can get. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
And that kind of offends me that these intelligent people would say something like that when essentially, from what I've heard, you're right. She was a medic. Yeah. I was in the Army. I got drafted, and she didn't. But still in all, the fact that you've been in the Army. My friend Denny Marceau was in the Army as a lieutenant, and ended up on the front page of the New Yorker because he refused to go to Vietnam. So there are a lot of really good, solid people in the Army, and I think it's naive and a lack of thinking, a lack of openness to say, I'm not going to vote for somebody because that person was in the Army. There are very few people like that, but they're out there.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's, another thing Bernie did, he has signed on to the Russiagate thing. Now that's...
Yes, that was that's the other thing.
Yeah, that's DNC telling him to sign on to the Russiagate thing. Not that they need to tell him, because he knows what he's supposed to do for them.
Yeah.
And he also eventually signed on to the fake news that the Washington Post put out about Putin interfering with the Vermont electric grid. So we have our Senator St. Patrick Leahy who signed on to that, Peter Welsh. They both went, oh my God, this is terrible. Putin's messing with our electric grid. Well, it was fake from the beginning. And then finally Bernie signs on to it. So anything that he can do to stick Russia in the eye, he will do. And I find that rather worrisome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the whole Russia. I mean, Hillary created the whole Russiagate thing the night she lost. And, as a way to reflect. And then she wrote that book on basically how to not be responsible for any of your own actions or mistakes. And it just, the Russiagate thing, they keep saying, there's always a new allegation again. And recently, Robert Mueller came out and said he has rock solid evidence that Trump committed a felony or something. And to me, if he had anything rock solid, wouldn't they have used it by now? What are they waiting for? Like, there's a 31-day government shutdown. If they have rock solid evidence that the president committed a felony or any kind of crime, what is he waiting for? If that's the truth, And then it comes out that Russia spent $4,700 on Facebook ads or something like that. Something totally irrelevant when compared to the money that, say, like a country like Israel contributes to our elections. Nobody talks about that. And so there's just a lot of hypocrisy, a lot of just nonsense going out, and it's when you think about the news, the whole fake news narrative, it's not fake news. It's corporate have an agenda, and they're sticking to that agenda, and you know what I mean. So you can call it fake news because it's not the truth, and reporters who report the truth either get locked away in an embassy in another country, or they have to flee the country to a place without extradition to properly keep tabs on the U.S. government and the crimes they commit. So, it's like the whole mainstream media mechanism is just one big corporate PR scheme. And, I guess I'd call it fake news, but more accurately, I think I'd call it just directed news, propaganda, if you will.
Well, I think there's specific fake news within that umbrella that you're describing.
Yeah.
So the specific fake news would be the weapons of mass destruction in Iran,
right.
leading us into that. I could go on for hours about the specific fake news that we had, but you're right. Yep. Overall, you've got the DNC, the RNC, the mainstream media, the deep state, all on the same page under the umbrella of, war, under the umbrella of the war economy and the support of Israel. Those two things are inviolable, is that the right word? And
inseparable, totally work together.
So that's why no politician, zero, in the entire Congress can say anything bad about Israel, because one of the gods out there, and by the way, that's why I got kicked off the air as a radio guy after 25 years, one of the gods out there is that you must support Israel, period.
No question about it. That's how it is.
And they not only, you mentioned how they influence elections.
Yeah.
Well, they don't just influence them, they will make sure that a candidate is slammed and out of the race.
Yep.
before that candidate can get anywhere. And
I mean, and they're trying to pass that that law now to make it a felony to speak out against Israel. I mean, that's just insanity to me. That's straight up First Amendment violation. It's like I just don't understand it. You know what it is? It's like what you said, that whole umbrella. And if you question anybody or any entity under the umbrella, you're going to be attacked. You're going to be arrested or framed or just smeared in the media, and you're just going to be squashed if you question anything under that umbrella. The war economy, Israel, anything under that, big pharma, all that stuff. Like you question any of that stuff, and they're just gonna stomp you, and or chase you out of the country, or try to arrest you for telling the truth.
Or like Wellstone, Wellstone was a well-known personality, and they killed him.
Yep.
And they ran Dennis Kucinich out of office, and they ran Cynthia McKinney out of office. The DNC did that. It wasn't the Republicans who did. Well, it was the Republicans who killed Wellstone, but Kucinich and McKinney were driven out by the DNC. And there's one other very new just happened in Florida. The governor of Florida, I don't know whether you saw this anywhere on Facebook. It was reported that the bed and breakfast people have said we're no longer going to support any activity of what's the official name of those bed and breakfasts? Anyway, we're not going to support any activity in the illegal settlements in Gaza. So the governor of Florida becomes a pimp and a whore at the same time by saying, okay, we're not going to allow you to operate in Florida. So that makes his constituency very happy, because it means he's thrown everything else out the window in support of Israel. And that's okay. It's okay to do that. So
that's unbelievable.
Yeah. And so these laws, they don't come necessarily from on top. They come from people knowing somehow on the ground that they should be doing this. There was that pastor in Dickinson, Texas. We're talking about very local here, who passed a law that you can't get any funding for your flood relief if you pledge to boycott Israel. Now, why would some pastor out of the blue do that? Well, he's part of an organization called the Religious Right for Israel, or there are various ones, and I may not have the title right. But that's how deep the support for Israel goes, and that's how thorough it is throughout the country. So it's a little disturbing.
It's on both sides. It's on the DNC and it's in the RNC, both sides.
Yeah.
And then Trump moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Yep.
Jerusalem was initially when Israel was established by the British. Jerusalem was initially set up to be like the Vatican. Like, it was supposed to be open to all. It wasn't to be controlled by one government. It was for all religions, all people. And since 1948, Israel has just continued to squeeze borders and expand territory. And they've gone into Syria. They've closed Gaza off completely, and then they strafed a U.S. warship, for like 3 hours. I think it was 60s maybe, before or during or after the 1967 war, and that was a U.S. battleship, and they strafed.
You're talking about the USS Liberty.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that was not a battleship. It was an information gathering ship, but all the same. Right. A good friend of mine wrote the book. Stephen Green wrote the book on that, and it was horrific. And it was ordered by Johnson, McNamara, and McCain's father. Admiral McCain to
Yeah.
not defend the USS Liberty. Why? Because Israel attacked it. That's why. That's okay.
Yeah, it's always the same players. You know what I mean? And it's just like they had said on the deck, and then and you know, and they were attacking the deck. You know, throwing napalm on the deck. Like, these people are sitting like, it was just one of the most horrifying things I've ever read, because I was born in 1981, so there's a lot of stuff that I missed. But that was one thing I found out, and I was horrified by it. And then Israel then said it was a mistake. Like, they couldn't see the big red, white, and blue flying on the ship's mast. It's like,
well, maybe you don't know, they sheep dipped the planes to make it look like it was Egypt doing it.
Yep.
But it was so obvious to the crew that they were Israeli planes that it got reported correctly, but the media was rather slow, like 15 years behind in exposing what actually happened. And Israel was very proud of that. They actually had a museum where they were celebrating the brave Israeli soldiers who strafed the lifeboats of the American sailors trying to survive. So it's all very well documented in Stephen Green's book called Taking Sides, by the way. It's at the Kellogg Hubbard Library, folks. If you want to read a great book about history, that's a good one to read, and it'll make you angry, so I warn you. Well, it should make you angry unless you happen to like strafing sailors in boats.
Boats, it's just unbelievable.
So we have to...
And they still haven't apologized for it, So
we have to wind up our first half hour, folks. This is Connor Kelley, and he's joining us from Boston, and we are going to be talking in a few minutes about Assange and Syria, perhaps, and a few other topics that we find interesting, and we're just having a little conversation here. So we'll sign off for the time being, and this will be posted on YouTube. You're probably watching it on YouTube, so you already know that. And it'll be locally produced in Montpelier, Vermont. So thank you very much, Connor, and we will be right back on the air in a little while.
All right. You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. I'll see you soon.
Yep.